Old Dads is a Bill Burr movie on Netflix where he's an old guy trying to adjust to the modern era. And he likes all the old things and everything new gets on his nerves. Overall, it's decently funny, but the humor is very on the nose. Some of it just seems late to the party, kind of like one of his more recent stand ups felt, where your dad is just now in on the joke. And the messaging of the movie seems really confused and, in a weird way, kind of like anti men and masculine men. Very strange. Overall, it's a decent movie, but I think it had the potential to be really good, and it's a shame that it wasn't. It just felt a little bit stale. So I'm going to go through it a little bit and talk about a couple scenes to let you know exactly what I'm talking about. The message of the movie is sort of he needs to adapt and he needs to change. I think the reason that I don't know if I like the message is because normally when you have this kind of battle between tradition and the younger kids wanting to push a new mindset, you do the thing where the kids seem right, but then there's some stuff they're missing. And the parents seem stubborn, but there's some stuff that they got wrong. And they kind of meet in the middle. That's sort of the message, is that the old ideas are around for a reason, but they can be updated in some ways. This movie doesn't really do that. What it does is the comedy is kind of making fun of the new ideas, but the movie centers around Bill Burr, and he's always the asshole, literally all the way till the end of the movie. And the movie's clearly based on him and his upbringing. If you've watched his stand-up, he's talked about it all the time, about how men used to be and they kept everything inside and they were angry. And that's clearly what he's supposed to be in this movie. And the movie ends with him going to therapy and crying and stuff. I think part of what I don't like about the movie when I said it was anti-man is that the women in this movie treat all the men like shit, but at no point are they ever wrong. Like, they're never wrong or framed as being the dick or anything. It's always the guys who are in the wrong. And to me, that really rubbed me the wrong way, because I don't like the mentality that pushes. And I don't like some of the tropes that this movie touches on. You have like kind of the angry husband who's Bill Burr. You have kind of the bitch husband who's his friend. You have the guy who needs to grow up, who is played by Soren from the shitty ass Halo show. And all the wives are just correct. Even the principal, who Bill Burr conflicts with throughout the movie, she's framed as a cunt, but she's never actually portrayed as being wrong. There's no point in the movie where everyone takes Bill Burr's side, or any character in the movie says that she's wrong. You just get like a little footnote at the end where it's like, oh, she got arrested because she was a piece of crap for embezzlement. The movie seems kind of confused on what it wanted to be, outside of an old guy learning to adjust to the new mindsets. Even the end of the movie, where the message is that Bill Burr goes to therapy and he's like turning himself around and opening up emotionally, that's all nice in an ideal world. But I just hate that the de facto answer to every problem now is you need therapy. Like, sometimes you just have to work on yourself and acknowledge your own flaws. And therapy can be used for that. But the fact that every problem now, people are like, just go to therapy, as if that solves everything, is not something I'm a fan of. And a lot of the humor is really on the nose. Like, it's the stereotypes of essentially the crazy far left cancel culture type people just throughout the movie. And maybe this is what Bill Burr lives with in LA now. I have no idea. I criticized Lady Ballers for being on the nose. And to me, this movie, I would give the exact same criticism, where you just hit every culture war trope of essentially far left lunatics, which is strange because Bill Burr, generally speaking, is probably center left. But he avoids all the cancel shit just because he doesn't care. And at the same time, he kind of concedes that moving in that direction is still right. Like, there's even a line at the end of the movie where he's talking about the principal getting arrested, and he's like, yeah, but she's a white woman, so nothing will happen. And I'm not going to go off into all this shit, but the reality is that women get better treatment for prison sentences. So do rich people. So do powerful politicians. That's just kind of how life works. I don't think the fact that she's white is even relevant, or that the line was even necessary or funny, really. It just seems like an ideological stick in there to jam in right at the end of the movie. So I want to go through a couple of scenes and just talk about some specifics, just to give examples of what I'm talking about the stuff that I liked and disliked about the movie. So like, this kid right here is taking over their company that they sold as CEO, and they still have some kind of partnership with him and his corporation. But, you know, he calls himself a disruptor, and he talks about spirit animals, all the stereotypical millennial shit. And these are the kind of characters you just get over and over. It's just these walking stereotypes of kind of cringy people, which, you know, fine, it's a comedy, but it'd be nice if there was a little bit more to it. Then you get some stuff like this where Bill Burr is the old man yelling at the kid on his scooter. If you've seen his stand-up, he has a thing where he's like, keep it down, that's not real music. And in the movie, he's kind of doing that here, where he's like, get out of the way, that's not a real vehicle, or it's a kid's toy. And obviously the movie ends with him having to get on a fucking kid's toy and get late to his wife's delivery because all men are immature assholes is kind of the message of the movie. This scene is really emblematic of what I'm talking about with the movie. Is this woman, who I don't know her name, is the wife of Andy from The Office and The Hangover. And she's a total bitch in this movie too. She's the principal. So Bill Burr was like 30 seconds late for picking up his kid, and she wants to charge him for being late to pick him up. And Bill Burr is getting irritated because he's like, oh, I was 30 seconds late or whatever. So she starts calling him out in front of everyone, and he's explaining to her, like, kind of angrily, you know, if you have a problem, step aside and say it to me. Don't try to embarrass me in front of my kid. And then he ends up kind of going off and calling her a cunt. And maybe I'm just a fucking old man too, because to me, he's clearly in the right here. But this is a thing throughout the movie where he's defending himself from people being assholes, and he's portrayed as the dick. And all of them, he doesn't just explode. He's like trying to defend himself normally and then gets pissed off, which I think is pretty normal. But this movie makes it out to be a bad thing, like he's short-tempered. Like, this is the type of shit right here. So this is a few minutes later. He goes home. His wife has gotten a call from other parents because he called the principal a cunt, and they're all freaking out. And the principal goes on about restorative justice and how they're a village, and how apologies don't just go to one person because of Gakaka, which is some kind of Rwandan tradition. And she even mentions the Rwandan genocide. So like, all very on topic, right on the nose kind of humor that they're going for there. So instead of doing a apology, he essentially does like a struggle session. And I kind of wonder if this was a nod to Gina Carano, because he mentions that there's like 40 people here. And for those who don't know, Gina Carano put out that tweet about how the government turned citizens against each other before they started genociding Jews in Germany. Disney outed her. They wanted her to have a session with like 40 trans people in a Zoom call, and she said no. It was essentially going to be a struggle session type thing, which is what this is, where he just has to apologize over and over, even though he knows he's not wrong. So he does his little apology, and then other people take turns like saying why they're offended. At one point, he had called the principal a stumpy cunt, and this guy on the left over here, who's the bigger guy, says that he was offended by the body shaming, and he kind of starts laughing at him, and it's decently funny, but it's all very on the nose. Like, the one woman says she wasn't even here, but hearing about it triggered her, and she starts crying, which again is like kind of funny, but also just very direct. The movie portrays this as Bill Burr being in the wrong because his wife chews him out. We need our son to get a good recommendation for a private school. He's in kindergarten, by the way. They want him to go to a good private school, so he needs to apologize and get the good recommendation from the principal, even though she's being a total bitch. And the wife does this over and over throughout the movie, just fucking lays into him when the principal is the one taking shots at him the entire time. She actually refers to him as a locust a little bit later because he tries to give her a plant, and she says this plant isn't compatible with the rest of them and would destroy the rest of them. And then she says the plant is representative of you, so it's direct. And this is why I said the movie has kind of confused messaging to me. Because normally you put this stuff in here, but then there's a point where the business wants to do something new, or the wife wants to do something new, or whatever the case is, and Bill Burr is like, oh, this is how we used to do it, and it's the right thing. So there's an admission that both people are right and wrong, not just Bill Burr's an asshole. We flash forward, and Bill Burr and his friend are trying to plan a theme for the fundraiser to help the kids out. Even though they live in some rich-ass neighborhood and go to a private school, they all need to do a fundraiser for their children. And Bill Burr and his friend keep mentioning themes like 80s and whatever. And one woman says, how about United States of Gender? And it gets into a whole thing about Bill Burr saying tranny. And they start being mad about how offensive he is. And this guy on the left says that we should stop having a conversation dominated by the white male voices. Bill Burr and his friend are like, aren't you white? And he goes, the 3% of my ancestry DNA test that's Peruvian or whatever would be offended by this. Again, it's all decent humor, but it's just so direct and so on the nose, and feels like it's about 4 years too late. But again, it's another thing where Bill Burr has to concede and essentially be the dick for saying the word tranny. Now they have to go try to make a sale for some guy for their company, and this young kid in the back is bitching because they're talking about who they'd rather sleep with in different weird scenarios, and Bill Burr calls him a feminist, and they're kind of making fun of him. Again, all pretty direct. There is a funny conversation in here, though, between his black friend in the back and the young guy, because he asks him if he likes rap, and he starts bitching about mumble rap, and the kid said he likes NWA, and then he like interrogates him about how he sings it in his car, and he tries to get him to sing it with the N-words included in the car, and the kid won't do it. So that's all amusing, but again, nothing groundbreaking. And this is another thing that really annoys me. Bill Burr's wife is on the left, and his friend's wife is on the right, and their kid is a maniac. And the wife just enables all of it, which it's kind of making fun of, but it never actually gets justified, or the kid never gets spanked or punished or anything. And this kid hits her stomach, and you can see she's pregnant. And she's like, why don't you get control of your kid? Blah, blah, blah. She's pretty upset. Bill Burr's friend's wife is like, fuck off, essentially. Like, you called me a bad parent. And that just kind of never gets rectified. And Bill Burr and his friend stop talking because he's a total pussy with his wife. But his wife is never really held accountable for it. After all the bitching she does at Bill Burr for getting in trouble with these other women and whoever, when he's the one in the right, as soon as she says, I'm so sorry, he's like, oh, it's no big deal. But he never gets that leeway. Like, she just tears him a new asshole every time. And then a few minutes here, she kicks him out of their fucking house. We go back. There was a recording in their car. It all seems like a setup, obviously, to push them out. And they don't get paid for it because they broke their morality clause. And it's just a recording of them talking and making jokes and stuff. And then actually this young guy gets fired for a personal tape that's in his apartment where he's singing to a rap song and he is saying the N-word. And I thought that they were going to do kind of a redemption arc for him, but he just disappears. I thought they were going to do the thing where he's like, oh, maybe I made a mistake, blah, 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 and we shouldn't be so sensitive about everything. But no, he just vanishes, gets fired, fucks off. Again, another super direct and obvious commentary on cancel culture shit and how they can't just have conversations, but they get punished for it. This is what makes this movie weird, is this is framed as like absolute bullshit, but then they also get punished for it, and they're never really redeemed in that capacity. We get a decent bit here where Bill Burr's friend is writing him letters about how much he misses him, and he's doing it on the toilet because he's scared of his wife. She pops in like a horror movie. That's all funny. But I kind of just hate this portrayal of men. These men in movies and TV shows who are just embarrassed and talked to like children by their wives all the time. Maybe it's a real thing. It's just really hard for me to imagine men acting like giant pussies to their wives. And even if it is real, I'm just tired of seeing it. This combination of scenes might piss me off more than anything in this whole movie. Bill Burr led this fundraiser. They're all having a good time. The principal comes up and essentially starts needling Bill Burr and just being a total bitch. And he keeps his calm, but he's like, look, just leave me alone. He's like, you're being a bitch right now. You're going to try to screw my kid over because of some petty bullshit between us. And his wife comes up and starts bitching at him for it because she's like, you can never control your temper. Even though he never loses control here. They start elevating their voices a little bit so everyone looks over. And she just storms out. He has to take a cab home because she left him. She has the door locked with a little chain thing like you see at a hotel. He forces it in. She comes out and is like, what the hell are you doing? And he's like, you locked me out of the house. And she's like, yeah, so why are you here? And then he's like, what do you mean? And then she just goes off on him about how he embarrassed her and he can't control his temper. And he just fucking takes it. And he even says, like, fine, I'll just stay on the couch. And she's like, no, I can't deal with you. Like, get out. The balls on this shit, I know this is something that happens in real life, but this is the kind of shit that I feel like is why shows like Snapped exist, where men and women kill their spouses. Like, she's a stay-at-home mom. He's sold his business, is helped raising their kid, has paid for everything, is trying to help her get ready to raise another kid, and she locks him out of the house and kicks him out for getting into an argument where he was right. He even says in one of these arguments, why don't you ever take my side? And she never does throughout the whole fucking movie. And he's still portrayed as the bad guy. I just think it's fucking disgraceful. I couldn't imagine my wife being like, you need to leave the house. If the YouTube channel stops, I guess you guys will know why. But anyway, he starts standing up for himself. They both start raising their voices and the kid comes out. So of course he feels bad and then leaves and goes and stays in a fucking dirty ass motel. And this entire idea that's promoted in culture of like men should be the ones to pay for everything and then fucking leave if there's an argument, even if they're right, is just ridiculous. I know people need space from each other sometimes, but I hate that this kind of stuff is just normalized and promoted. He's at his motel. There's a gross ass woman across the way burping and farting and stuff. This guy who works here is like, hey, you need to stop smoking. And Bill Burr's like, you're smoking. And the guy's like, no, I'm vaping. And there's a whole big argument about vaping versus smoking. And it's just another thing that's supposed to point out that he's a boomer, and it's like kind of funny. And then he asks the woman what she thinks. She says that she agrees that vaping is what's wrong with this country, along with the immigrants. Like, how many more do we need? And Bill Burr makes a face like, oh, I don't want her agreeing with me. I guess that's the movie's view of people who are wanting to control the border. I don't know. It was a really weird thing and really out of place thing for something that wasn't that funny. And this drags on definitely longer than it needed to. Bill Burr goes out to get a sandwich because his wife is completely ignoring him. Again, totally fucking inappropriate that he lets his wife kick him out of the house and then just cut him off completely from all communication. It's a miserable relationship. I couldn't fucking imagine behaving that way. Especially considering it's not like he cheated on her or something. He got into an argument with someone who was being a bitch and he was right. Is the whole premise of the fucking movie. And Soren has found out that his wife is pregnant. So the three of these guys are supposed to go to Vegas and party. And the one in the back seat, who's been the bitch the whole movie, is doing cocaine. Again, just dragged out and unnecessary. They go to a strip club, which I'm not going to show that on screen because there's titties everywhere. And this is where they all have their revelation that they need to grow up and get with the times, essentially. Like Soren was reluctant about being a dad, now he's on board. The pussy guy in the back eventually stands up for himself at the end of the movie, although nothing really comes from it. And Bill Burr accepts that he needs to go to therapy instead of the strip club. And before they go to the strip club, they're at the casino. And this part's actually pretty funny. They run into the guy that pushed him out because he's on suspended indefinitely leave or whatever. And he has to go to sensitivity training because he used the term spirit animal, which is offensive to Native Americans, which is good. That's all funny. And they start talking shit to him, making fun of him. And they're like, how does it feel to get fired when you didn't do anything? And the kid just starts breaking down crying. And he's supposed to be like the representation of a millennial. So that I did find funny. That you just get this grown man to cry immediately. And this is where I thought the movie was going to have a decent message, but it never really does. As you find out this kid lost his job and his girlfriend broke up with him. And then Bill Burr and them were all sympathetic to him and they're being nice to him. And that's the moment usually where you get the, oh, it doesn't really matter what your age is. We're all going through the same things type scene. But it just never really happens. They all go to the strip club and act like immature assholes. They take an Uber from the strip club. It's like 100 miles back to LA. And they hit a parade. So Bill Burr has to get out and use one of the scooters he's been yelling about. The friends hop on one. Nice payoff, I guess, for old men modernizing themselves. And Bill Burr misses the birth of his second child. And now he's upset and crying and tells his wife he's been going to therapy and blah, blah, blah. And that's kind of it for the movie. That's the payoff, is he's a scumbag and wrong the entire time, even when he's just standing up for himself to people who are acting like assholes. But his wife takes him back because he cried and went to therapy. Make it that fucking message whatever you will. And this is the kind of shit that I was talking about when I said the movie was weirdly anti-male. Is the girlfriend here of Soren proposed to him because he was caught off guard by the pregnancy. And obviously he's older and she's younger. And he had a vasectomy and stuff. Here he gets down on one knee and says, will you marry me? After she said to him, we should get married just casually. And she fucking chews him out and says, at least take me out to dinner and get dressed up and stuff. So it's all this stuff that's just like men should just bend over for women and get pegged, I guess. And then Bill Burr's friend tells his wife she's cold. It's just weird because he's like, how about a fucking blowjob every once in a while and stuff, which is all funny and I'm sure married men can relate to. But she smacks him in the face and he says there's some passion finally instead of her being cold. And it's like, that's what we want is women to either be cold bitches or smack us in the face. They can't just be normal and respectful. All you had to do is flash to a scene at the very end with her getting dressed up for him or something. It's not that fucking hard. They do a terrible joke in here where he says about the blowjob thing and a black dude walks by and says no cap and does like a stereotypical black guy handshake with him. And he starts yelling no cap, like he knows what it means. And he kind of gets it wrong. So it's like boomer humor again. That's the kind of stuff where it really feels stale and like they just waited about 3 or 4 years too long to make this movie. And right here at the end, Bill Burr's playing catch with his kid again. He's got the baby strapped to his chest and this guy says, should you really be doing that? Is that safe for your baby? And Bill Burr's like, oh, I didn't think of that. Have a nice day. And then mumbles fucking asshole after he leaves. And I just hate the whole sentiment of this scene. Like, is it really better to have some guy tell you how to raise your kid and then mumble fucking asshole under your breath than to just say mind your own fucking business? I mean, that seems to be the implication of the movie. For me, it's just kind of weird. So yeah, overall, the movie's decent, but the messaging is really confused throughout. I think the movie doesn't actually understand what it said. Because what it intended, clearly, was to make the young generation look ridiculous, but the old generation needs to change. But what it actually said was, the young generation is fucking ridiculous, and you should probably just cater to it. And women especially, because they're always right. It could have worked, but it just didn't for me. I'm finding this to be something I wish I didn't notice in Hollywood as much now, is comedy in movies seems to have way too much meta stuff in it, and it seems like their morals are so askew from what they should be that it kind of makes movies hard to watch. Like the one with Jennifer Lawrence was a decent concept, but it was also kind of creepy. She's like a 32-year-old woman hooking up with an 18-year-old kid. Why not just make her like 24 or make him like 25 and let her be 32? So you end up with this really weird premise where they're promoting morality in a way that doesn't really make sense. Like, remember Liar Liar? The whole message of the movie was that Jim Carrey was a piece of crap. But at the end, he chose to be a good dad and an honest man. It's a way more normal message than this kind of shit. Or no hard feelings or whatever. I don't want to keep going. I talked way too long about this. If you saw it, let me know what you think. Am I overthinking it? Should I just enjoy the movie and laugh? Did you like it? Dislike it? Think it was funny or not? I try to respond to all the comments that aren't just insults. Like and subscribe and all that shit. Thanks. See ya.